You ready in the back, Debbie?
We are.
Fine. So long. There we go. Good morning, everyone. Today is Wednesday, June 12th, 2024, and we'd like to welcome everyone to the board meeting. We'll call this meeting to order at 9 a.m. The teleconference number is 971-254-3149, conference ID 866-914-607#. Audio capabilities are listen only and are offered on a best effort for the public. Our meeting is also live streamed, and you can join us online by going to our website or to tctvonline.com. Click on live broadcasts. Before we get started, I'd like to remind everyone to mute your phones. You can do this by pressing *6. Please unmute your phone when your agenda item is ready to be discussed. For those joining via computer, please unmute your microphone and turn on your camera when your agenda item is called. All others must remain muted with their cameras turned off. Thank you. Public comment. Those intending to provide public comment to the board may attend in person or email submissions to the public comments email on our website. Public comments received by noon on Tuesday will be distributed to the board, excuse me, posted online before the meeting and become part of the public record. You may also provide public comment virtually by registering ahead of time. To register, please email public comments by noon on Tuesday prior to the board meeting. Public comments can also be mailed to the Board of Commissioners office at 201 Laurel Avenue, Tillamook, Oregon, 97141. For more information on public comment options, please visit the Board of Commissioners webpage. Do we have anyone signed up in the room, or has anyone registered online for public comments?
We have one person signed up in the room.
Terrific, thank you. Okay, well, we've called the meeting to order. I'd like to welcome everybody, invite you to sign the guest list if you haven't, and we'll open with the Pledge of Allegiance. Absolutely. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and
to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we'll start right out with public comment. Good morning, April. Please introduce yourself.
I'm April Bailey. I live in Nescoin. Good to see you in person.
You too, thank you, but is your microphone on?
Oh.
Will you push that button?
Actually,
Oh, okay. Thank you.
I will comment real quick on that note. I've noticed in some of your meetings, the person on this mic is not very audible in the recording, although I know Jane does an excellent job and I really appreciate her work. So good morning. I want to start out by speaking in favor of the long-awaited repairs to the Shiloh levee. That's agenda item number 11. I'm very happy to hear that's being done. Thank you so much for moving forward with that, all of you. I'm also in favor of proceeding with the building and the ensuring of the Tillamook County Veterans Memorial. That's wonderful. These are exactly the things that our governing elected officials need to be doing. We need functional infrastructure for general use, and we need to facilitate common communal values, such as celebrating our military veterans. And I just want to remind everyone, since I heard someone mention something about wearing blue on Friday for mental health, I think it's also Flag Day on Friday. So, and that's the American flag. So I hope that we'll all be celebrating what that stands for. I do want to speak, because I'm not available next week, on what was agenda item number 9, which was postponed. This was to modify or increase and establish, is how I would say it, environmental health fees. These changes, I believe, are disastrous in timing, debilitating governance, and will have devastating consequences. As for the disastrous timing, I think you guys understand we are currently in economic distress, both at the county level, in businesses and personally. As you probably know from talking to local businesses and individuals, the economic I would say, trying to think of the right word. Businesses have been doing poorly this spring between the weather and of course the increase in costs is fuel, people not coming because of the weather and the increase in cost to visit here. So that makes this a bad timing for this. The weather obviously has influenced that, as well as there's been a lot of increases in federal and state taxes and fees. You're all aware of this. As for debilitating governance, this does not promote economic freedom or economic success within businesses. Again, it's going to discourage people from coming. I will use one example in this. For instance, when we're looking at an organizational camp fee, I'm not really sure what that is, but it went from $0 to $500. One person commented when looking at these fees, they're very arbitrary. They don't seem to be dependent on numbers, like in numbers of spaces or rooms. There's also the fact that some of the fees create reverse incentives, such as there's a recheck inspection fee for a second fill. It's increasing from 75 to 150. I am not accusing any of our current health employees of wanting to fail someone, but if they do, they get a lot of money. There's also any devastating consequences in that this again discourages businesses from opening or changing their menu apparently, as that's a huge increase, remodeling. And I guess I don't even, not being in those fields, I don't know what that means. Changing menus is changing your coffee drink menu for the month. I don't know. Can you get charged $100? Possibly. The health department would have to, let people know about that. But all of this just debilitates business at a very terrible time. I'm going to end with this. There are a lot of people that would like to be here today. But as you know, Wednesdays at 9 a.m., not a great time. I have listened and attended a lot of your meetings, and the reasoning we get for the timing of the meetings is you have to do your business during business hours. Respect that. But a lot of people that come here to present the items on your agenda are county employees. If we could schedule one meeting a month in the evening and we could plan the things like these environmental health fee increases for that meeting, you would get a lot more people coming to have input on this democratic process.
Thank you, April. Okay, I need to let you know that, as April noted, item 9 on our agenda today has been postponed. So we'll move right into the legislative administrative agenda with item 5, which is consideration of a stormwater drainage easement with Community Action Resource Enterprises, Inc. for property located at Township 1 South, Range 9 West in Section 30 BC, tax lots 1200 and 1300 in Tillamook County, Oregon. And with us this morning, we have Marlisa De Jesus, the project manager of the Houseless Action Network, and Jeff Blackford, the executive director of Community Action Resource Enterprises, Inc. Good morning, and thank you for being here.
Good morning.
Morning. So the easement that you guys have in front of you, as you had said, was for the installation of a French drain just south of our lease border. This drain would be CARE's responsibility to install, maintain, repair, all of the things as long as the CARE lease agreement is in order. So initially, these were not in the plans to install a French drainage system there. But given the weather that we've experienced in this last winter, we did determine that it was prudent to just go ahead and made sure that we had a good process in place there for the longevity of the micro shelter village and that entire property.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner?
Thank you for bringing it forward. I know that that lot was very heavily treed. And so I think prior to being able to clear the trees and really see exactly what that was going to look like, I think we've run into a couple of things that require some readdressment, this being one of them. And if I'm understanding correctly, that French drain really sits at the edge of the county's parking lot, right? So we have that impervious asphalt surface that's going to just direct the water
directly onto the
Right.
foundations of the,
Right, directly into that location. And so this French drain will allow it to drop down and percolate at a deeper level, which is, and Rachel would be able to speak to that more, way more than I can, but percolate at a deeper level and return to where it would normally end up, which is in the slough right there. It's kind of going to go under the village instead of through the village, if I understand correctly.
yeah, we want to preserve the foundations of the village.
Absolutely. And the percolation of groundwater is always a cleaning mechanism, which I think is actually one of the really great things about how groundwater works. So as it's coming off a parking lot, there's always a question of if you just put that into a straight drainage pipe, it doesn't have that same percolation effect. And you don't have that ability of the soil to kind of remove pieces that come off our streets, which is really where it comes from. So I'm in support.
Commissioner?
Thank you. As am I. It sounds like this is pretty routine, and French drains are, in my judgment, a preferable way because they return it back to the earth rather than to a collection system. And so without knowing exactly where I know approximately where it is, it sounds like something that should be done. So I'll certainly favor this as we roll forward.
Thank you. Likewise, as do I. It's logical because for folks who are watching who may not know, the property Care has leased is down the hill from our parking lot. So if that water is just running down the hill through the village, it's not going to be wonderful. So I think this is a great idea and we're ready for that.
Madam Chair, in consideration of a stormwater drainage easement with Community Action Resource Enterprises, Inc. for property located at Township 1 South, Range 9 West, in Section 38 BC, tax lots 1200 and 1300 in Tillamook County, Oregon, I move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Motion passes. Thank you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Item 6 is consideration of Tillamook County's 2024-2025 property and casualty insurance renewal. And with us, we have Cheryl Spellman, the owner of Hudson Insurance. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us in person.
Turn this one on and sit here. So, can't believe you're here again already. Just seems like time flies. I'm sure I say that every year, but it really does. We usually have an opportunity to kind of go through the details or specifics of your insurance renewal before this meeting. But since that didn't happen this year, I'd like to take, if it's all right, just a few extra minutes to talk about kind of some of the things that are going on in our industry that ultimately affect you guys.
Please do.
So I know that you probably have seen on the renewal comparison that was included with the agenda, and you probably anticipated that insurance rates unfortunately are increasing significantly again this year. It doesn't seem to matter if you're talking about public entity insurance or your personal auto insurance, the rates just seem to keep going up. As I've mentioned in the past, reinsurance is the primary reason for the increased rates that we see personally. And that's the insurance that insurance companies purchase to be able to pay their claims. So really the question becomes what's driving that increase? And among many different items, two of the main things that are happening in the last decade especially, but in the last year are 1, catastrophic property losses, and 2, nuclear jury verdicts. So on the catastrophic property loss or CAT loss side, there were a couple of interesting facts that I wanted to share with you. 10 of the largest loss years ever recorded have happened since 2004. That's in 2 decades, we've had 10 of the largest loss years ever recorded. Even more interesting than that is that 6 of the last 7 are in that 10. So worldwide in 2023, we had 33 CAT losses, and a CAT loss is a loss that pays out $1 billion or more. So we had 33 of those worldwide last year alone. 25 of them were in the United States. I was shocked by that. I couldn't believe that. There are things like we had 19 convective storms, which are tornadoes, hailstorms, windstorms, a wildfire, hurricane, freeze event, a couple of floods, a drought, right? That's included in that list of 25. That does not, it's important to note that does not include any of the many other claims that, or rather weather events that have taken place that don't top that $1 billion mark, which we know there are many, many of those that happened as well. So unfortunately, the main drivers of property insurance rate increases this year are those catastrophic property losses that we've experienced. And really, again, the 25 in the US versus 33 in the world is amazing to me. And then the inflated cost of building materials, which we're still seeing, even though it's not at the level that they were before. On the liability side, I mentioned nuclear jury verdicts. So really that's kind of a phrase that the insurance industry has adopted, but it's just verdicts that are enormous these days in comparison to what they used to be. I won't spend a lot of your time giving you details of specific examples on that, but last year the nation did see one $43 million auto liability claim against a city and a $45 million excessive use of force claim. And the list just goes on. You just have to Google the topic and you'll see numerous examples of these verdicts that have just gotten out of control. The other trend that we're seeing that was really interesting to me is the use of third-party litigation funding. So really what this is private equity firms basically go out and venue shop or lawsuit shop and find those that have the highest probability of success, and then they invest their capital in them.
Wow.
So yeah, it was really interesting to me too to hear that. But so what that does basically in every situation is it extends the length of the litigation and it significantly drives up the cost and severity of those claims. So with those funds, something I found interesting as well is that before they were being utilized, the verdicts were usually much more reasonable. The plaintiff was receiving approximately 55% of the settlement, and the plaintiff's attorneys were receiving about 26% of that. Since these funds have gotten involved, the plaintiff's average amount that they're receiving from a settlement has decreased to about 43%, and the plaintiff's attorneys are now receiving 38% of a much higher verdict. And this is a trend that we're seeing right now. Every year in the US alone, the investment rate is at about 10% into these funds, and there's $16 billion in the US in capital that's invested in these private equity firms that go out and look for nothing but lawsuits that they can inflate. So I know that's a lot of info to throw at you in just a few minutes, but I really just wanted to give you some insight behind what is happening in our industry and the ultimate trickle-down effect that it has on your policy and everyone else. I have a significant amount of other information that I could share with you about CIS specifically and what they do to maintain good relationships with their reinsurers that end up minimizing the rate increases that they see and the coverage limitations that they experience that then ultimately benefit their members, but I won't spend a lot of time on that. I do have information, like I said, though, so if you're interested in it, let me know and I can send that to you because CIS has done a good job when you compare them to other pools in the nation and other insurance carriers in the nation. When I talk about reinsurance rates increasing for the companies, they're looking on average at about 30 to 40%. And CIS, because they've had one of their reinsurance carriers, their primary reinsurance carrier, they've had a 22-year relationship with, and that's unheard of. Usually they jump around. That's part of the reason why, unfortunately, even though it's a high increase, it's lower than what the average is for other insurance companies and pools in the nation. So specifically to the county now, at their February conference, CIS anticipated anywhere between a 15 and 16% overall rate increase. And that was before any exposure changes that are unique to each entity. So for the county, over the last year, you did have a few budget lines that increased slightly that do affect, those are used as rating factors on the liability side. You had a number of new autos added and we only removed 3, which auto physical damage is one of the biggest coverages that reinsurance rates have gone sky high on. And then probably the biggest factor is that you had an appraisal completed in 2023 that didn't hit your books, didn't hit your renewal until this year. So, and that generated about a $9 million increase in property coverage. But that is also the fact that CIS has every member that they have on a 5-year cycle for their appraisals is one of the reasons that they're able to keep their reinsurance rates lower because those companies trust that they truly are insuring the property values of all of the entities around the state to value. The good news for the county is that you do have an excellent loss ratio right now. Overall, the county has a 13% loss ratio, and that's excellent. And so that helped to keep the overall rate increase for the county down into the 12% range, as opposed to the anticipated 16% before your exposure changes were added in. So this translates into a new annual premium this year of $819,906.83 to be exact, which is an approximate increase of about $82,000 after all of your endorsements and exposure changes are factored in. So what are your options? I did not offer the retro deductible plan again this year. I did look at it, but it really does not pencil out right now. It's not just solely because you didn't have a good experience on it 10 years ago, but it doesn't pencil out right now. So that's something we're going to keep in our back pocket as an option at some point, but not for now. I also took a hard look at the aggregate deductible plan. But when you take your loss history for the last 10 years and you compare it to the deductible plan that you're on right now, you would have to take on a $125,000 aggregate deductible to come close to the same potential savings. So it's not even quite as much, but it's in the neighborhood. So that basically leaves you with two options this year. We can stay with the $10,000 per occurrence deductible on general liability and auto liability. And you've had 3 really good years with that. Your actual savings, and I know I'm throwing a lot of numbers at you here, but your actual savings over those 3 years over what you would have paid had you not had a deductible is $214,670. That's your actual savings. And that's even if all of the outstanding deductibles are paid with any claims that are open right now. So if any of those claims happen to close out without payment, then that savings would be even higher. And so then over the course of the last 10 years, when you take your historical claim data and you look at it and say you had been on that 10K deductible for the last 10 years, the county would have had the possibility of saving up to $502,000. And that's important when we look at what your next option is, which is to jump to a $25,000 per occurrence deductible for your GL and auto. And I know that sounds scary, but unfortunately it is the next option. It goes from 10K to 25K. There's nothing in between. What that does for you up front is it immediately saves $54,000 off the initial premium, brings the annual premium down to $765,589. You have the same benefits of the 10K deductible. And when you look at that same 10-year history with the claims you have had, if you had been on the 25K plan, you would have had the possibility of saving up to $713,000 over that time frame. So another $211,000 over what your 10K deductible would save. So it is a potentially good option. So what's my recommendation? I really do think that the county should consider retaining a larger portion of its risk. I think that you're getting to a size now premium wise that you really need to be looking at how you can maybe potentially save some of that premium and take on some of the risk and the risk controls yourself a little more. Obviously, I don't want to, there's no way to know when you're going to have a bad claims year. And I don't want anybody to be in a bad position. So you have to know that you have the capacity to pay those deductibles if they arise. But that being said, if you look at your historical plans, it does appear to be a viable option. And to be honest with you, I really think with the way the industry is going, that in the next few years, we're going to have to be looking at even higher deductible options, maybe a retro plan, maybe an aggregate plan, something that does truly put even more risk on the county. So that's really the two options that we have available this year, and I'll turn it back to you for questions.
Thank you. Thank you. Commissioners?
Oh, thank you. Yes, I do have a number of questions, as I usually do when I see Cheryl. And you know what my first one is without my asking, so you want to answer it before I ask it?
Okay, so they're with Gallagher for their liability and RSUI for their property. And they've been with RSUI for 22 years and they're A-rated. They actually have a mix of 17 standard reinsurance carriers that they use to get their $600 million limit, but RSUI has 300 million of that.
Mhm. Okay, and they've been around a long time. Do you know what their best rating is?
I know that it's A+. I don't know if it's A++, but I know that it's over an A.
Okay, good enough for that one. So when you mentioned the third party, I have read a number of articles, and there was a program on 60 Minutes a while back about this reinsurance, or not the reinsurance, the third party where, and I guess I start by saying we could solve a lot of these problems if we do what Shakespeare said and kill all the lawyers or something like that. Sorry, Bill, but he knew that was coming, I think, but I remember that exactly what you said then, that there are venture capital firms that are formed and they seek out lawsuits that have some probability of success, and then they fund them for 1% of the payout. And I guess that's capitalism at its very best or worst, depending on your point of view. But I can see where that would factor in and tend to enlarge whatever settlements came out of a jury. And I guess that's the way it is. So the next question I would ask, and I think based on what you said in my looking at your spreadsheet here, I think the county should take the higher deductible. It seems to make sense. And of course, that's a bit of a gamble, but I think it's a measured gamble for my part of this. So what about workers' comp? I don't think you mentioned too much about that. Are you involved with that as well?
I actually am not. I think the county has their workers' comp through an agent out of Washington, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, that
I don't know.
I don't know, so others probably know more than I about that. So those are my questions as of the moment. I think the column you had on the right then seems to make more sense. And I think there is a trend just from my reading different things that the deductibles are being enlarged and people are accepting more responsibility on their own. The downside, of course, is if you have 3 or 4 incidents, then you end up paying more than if you were insured. But at some point, it's a balancing act, and it seems to me that with CIS, which I like, and the slightly higher deductible up to 25,000 is not at all unreasonable, recognizing that, you know, the county doesn't have a lot of extra money, but so it's a sort of a roll of dice, but I think it's a fair business decision to take it up by 15,000 bucks. And you said there's only the 10, then it goes to 15, and then whatever else beyond that.
Correct. And when you look at, that's why the 10-year data is so important, because as you mentioned, you could have 5 claims in 1 year. Now you've more than exceeded your
Yeah.
savings for the year. But when you look at your 10-year data, that's where you stand to save premium. And with the per occurrence deductible, if we can get on that and have an extended period of time where you have a higher per occurrence deductible that you're comfortable with and you have good experience, jumping into an aggregate or a retro is easier from that point. And that's where you're going to see even more significant savings.
What are your other clients doing? And if they're faced with essentially the same dilemma, are they moving to larger deductibles and being self-insured is basically what it is? Is that what's happening in the market?
Yeah, it's taking on more of your own risk, basically. And so I do have other public entities that are renewing, also ones through CIS this year that are looking at higher deductibles that have never even had a deductible. And they're potentially looking at jumping from a 0 deductible to a $10,000 deductible, much smaller entities than the county. But yeah, that's what they're looking at because their premiums unfortunately are extreme.
Well, thank you. Those are my questions for now, unless something else comes up.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, I don't really have any questions, comments, and I would love for Sean to engage just a little bit on this conversation since it is, you know, she's the one that looks at available cash and how this might work. And so I would love to hear Sean's thoughts. Certainly going to an increased deductible is, I mean, I've done it in my own life as well, right? As things have gone up where you say, I have the ability to do that. I'm gonna stop paying into this what if pool. And certainly with 10 years of data that says paying into the what if pool is more expensive than taking our own risk on. I think it makes sense at this point for us to adjust. And to your point, to realize this is probably one of what will end up being many adjustments into the future as the environment in which we operate changes. So Sean, can I ask if, you know, what your thoughts are? And
I would say exactly the same thing, is that it's changing. As Cheryl said, we had the reappraisals of our properties and that made a huge increase. But I think more counties, more businesses, cities are moving to a higher deductible. And I agree that we should probably move that way, and hopefully we see those savings over the next couple of years.
Thank you. I think it's, as always, a good time to look at our training programs, our safety programs, all of the things that help to reduce the number of incidents we're likely to have. This is a good time for us to really probably double down and look at all of those again. I'm not sure the last time that CIS paid us a visit for taking a look at our operations and our best practices and making sure that we are in fact doing all the right things. But I believe that's a free service through CIS, that it might be a good time to take advantage of it, just to, see if there's anything we can improve to better protect ourselves as we do take on more of our own risk.
And if I may on that,
Yeah.
That is something that's in the works for August. They have not been to the county and done a full best practices assessment since 2022. So the new risk manager that you have now is planning to come down sometime or set it up for sometime in August or this fall so that that can be done. Because obviously, like you said, the higher deductible you have, the more risk you're taking yourself, the more controls you want to have.
Thank you. That's exciting. I think it'll be a good opportunity.
Thank you for being here. Thanks for talking through this with us and also for providing the background about the industry.
Yeah.
Unlike Doug, I did not know about third-party investments that that the investing world is investing in lawsuits. It's maddening and it makes me think about, like in my mind, I'm sorting out the things we cannot control are the weather. The things we can control are the attorneys. There should be, yeah. What I mean is that at a government level that's higher than us, someone should be looking at that because the insurance rates, the increasing insurance rates impact everyone. And there are a lot of opportunities in a capitalist society to make money, and investing in lawsuits, it doesn't seem like that should be one of them. So that's maddening. I agree with going to the higher deductible and obviously if it doesn't work, we can change it in the future. I think I appreciate what you said about taking on more risk and what that means. And what my fellow commissioner here just said about we need to re-engage in those conversations because it's kind of a cultural shift. There's been a period of time where we could count on insurance to cover us if something happened. So it's a new communication to say, if something happens, it's going to be very expensive for us before insurance kicks in. So we'll have to work on that, but it seems like a reasonable risk based on our numbers for the last 10 years. So I appreciate that assessment and recommendation. Okay.
Before you entertain a motion, I have two other items related, but perhaps I could have a moment after we consider the motion.
Please.
Yes, thank you. I'll wait till we do the motion.
Okay.
Okay.
And I think we're ready.
Okay. Madam Chair, in consideration of Tillamook County's 24-25 property and casualty insurance renewal, I move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
I think in that motion, do I need to say that I approve renewal at a $25,000 deductible simply because we discussed both? Yeah, so amend my motion to that.
Okay.
And I'll second that at the $25,000 level.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Motion passes. Thank you. So Doug had something else.
Yes, a couple of other, and I wonder, Madam Chair, could we consider item 12 out of order because it has to do with insurance, and I believe Cheryl's been involved with that. And we do have our veterans officer in the room, so perhaps we could do that and save everyone a moment and while we're on the topic. And then I also have another item with respect to insurance that came up at a fair board meeting last night. And so without getting into a lot of detail, I'll have a question or two. So if that's okay, could we go to 12 and maybe deal with that while we have the right people in the room?
You bet. So we will jump ahead to item 12. Consideration of a request to approve insurance coverage for the Tillamook County Veterans Memorial. With us, we have Nick Torres, our Veteran Service Officer. Good morning.
Good morning, Commissioners. So I was coming to you to ask for insurance for the Veterans Memorial. It's going to cost $250 a year, added on to the already existing CIS policy.
Thank you. For the benefit of our watchers and listeners, could you talk a little bit about the memorial?
So the memorial is going to be a four-sided memorial with a POW MIA on one side, a boots, helmet, and rifle on one side, a verse dedicated to honoring our combat vets that fell in combat. And then on the fourth side is going to have the names of the donors that made the memorial possible. Then on top, there's going to be a bronze eagle, and there's going to be lighting, really nice landscape.
Thank you. Can you tell folks where it will be?
So it's going to be where the old Shell station used to be, right across from the corral. Right now, you can see the there's an 84 by 84 inch foundation already set and curing. And the install date is gonna be June 26th at 10 a.m.
That's exciting. Well, I'm super excited about that project, and the only question I have had about it is how will people get there? Where will they park and how will they get there?
So they can park down by the slough on either side, and then there's crosswalks leading to the island. They could park by the Pioneer Museum and use the crosswalks to get there. I access that site normally using the crosswalks,
Okay,
so it is accessible.
great. Thank you very much. Commissioners?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I fully support that and, you know, I'm saying what took us so long, but thank you for the work you've done. So my question then for Cheryl is, for a relatively nominal amount, what does that protect? If somebody came in and knocked it over or hit it accidentally with a vehicle, what does the insurance do? Replace it or bring it back to the way it was or what?
Well, so I'm glad you asked that because that is something that I've discussed with Nick. First of all, I've seen the artist rendition and it's beautiful, and I think that'd be an excellent use of that space. From a liability standpoint, it's a non-issue. The certificate can be issued to the city who has the contract with ODOT, I believe, to lease the land, and it's not going to impact the premiums. The 250 is for property coverage, and that's where the discussion was, because you can do that and it is a nominal amount, but what I wanted everybody to know is that because the county has $1,000 property deductible, that really vandalism of some sort is probably your biggest exposure. And at some point, you're not going to want to turn in claim after claim after claim for something like that. If it exceeds $1,000 in damage, which I know this memorial is valuable, it's much more valuable than that, but you're going to want to think about whether or not it's worth paying the $250 for the what if and maybe turning in a claim or maybe not turning in a claim. Because if a car hits it, their auto liability is going to be responsible for replacing it. So that kind of takes that out of the equation. So from your risk standpoint, I can't think of anything other than probably vandalism that you'd ever have a claim for. And if that happens, is it going to be worthy of submitting a claim? I just don't want to see you pay $250 and then never have never use it, never. If you had a claim, you don't turn it in because it's.
What if it's an uninsured motorist and there are plenty of them cruising our streets? Then who pays?
Well, then if you have it on your property coverage, on your mobile equipment or your property in the open schedule, you would be able to turn it in. And in that scenario, it makes sense to pay the $250 a year to have the coverage. Because if the entire thing is completely destroyed like that, you would want to be able to replace it. I'm just saying that the likelihood is that you're going to have people vandalize it and you're probably not going to be able to submit claims for that. So you're aware.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so this is property, $1,000 deductible. How does that play into our $25,000 deductible we just agreed that we were gonna take on?
So the $25,000 deductible is only for your general liability and your auto liability.
Okay,
So if you have an auto accident that you're liable for, or you get sued for something, you have that $25,000 deductible. It's still $1,000 deductible on your property because I've looked at changing it to say a 5 on property, and your savings is less than 1 deductible per year. So it's just not worth it to change that.
okay. And we are essentially additionally insuring, so it's the city's contract, this is the part I was confused about, it's ODOT's property. It's the city's contract with ODOT, so can you explain again how that's all rolls together? And how is, so is it us are we first in line to pay for an insurance issue? Does the city have a part? Does the ODOT have a part? How does that all tie together?
So I think there's a contract, right, with the city. I thought I had reviewed a contract with the city, and I don't want to speak out of turn here, but it's been a couple weeks, but
Okay,
I think there's a contract with the city that the county is going to own this memorial and then lease the land from the city to have it on, because the city's the one that has the contract with ODOT. Could be wrong.
okay,
Yeah, that's accurate. You know, the city signed they adopted the property from ODOT just because a private entity couldn't, so they signed off on adopting that piece of land. But other than, you know, signing off on the, I guess, adoption paperwork, that's all they want to do with the memorial. So
Okay. Thank you. And I'm in support of this. I think the memorial is a great thing. I think I playing through the things that Cheryl's talking about, but to your point, Doug, if an uninsured driver hits it, I think that's what we are essentially insuring against. Although with a Eagle on top, you're also probably, that's not going to be a small cost. If what's what I'm envisioning, if someone were to vandalize that, you also might be at more than 1,000. Yeah.
What are your thoughts, Nick, on Cheryl's suggestion that maybe it doesn't pencil out to insure it?
So that insurance is part of the zoning permit. So without insurance, the planner could yank the permit.
Okay,
So
all right. Good information. Okay. Anything else on this?
Don't think so.
One other question, we can't be the first organization that has had something similar, meaning monuments and, they're all over a lot of cities. Are they treated the same way, Cheryl? Do you know, or how are those insured? It's kind of maybe a specialty type item, but I know in our, this large city to the east of us, they've had considerable issues with people tearing down statues and different things. Where does that liability lie?
Well, I think with reference to them, they might be self-insured, but, so I'm not sure how they handle it. But in your scenario, it has to be specifically listed on the property in the open schedule. And so then it's covered with replacement costs for every cause of loss that any building or any other property you own would have. So, I mean, anytime CIS can subrogate, can find the person who did the damage or caused the problem and subrogate back against them, they're going to do that to try to recoup the funds, and the county benefits from that first, because if they are successful at that subrogation process, the deductible is what gets reimbursed first. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. And in essence, we would be sort of self-insured, but I see this because of what I understand is the description and the Eagle and all. There could easily be maybe 20,000 and up to replace it. And I don't know, Nick, what it actually costs. Do you have a number, rough number?
I do. So it is 83,000, including the Bronze Eagle.
$83,000.
Yes, the memorial itself. Without the other in-kind services like the landscape maintenance, or the landscaping is going to be 16K. The foundation is, very expensive.
Yes, well, I think it would be foolish to not insure it.
Sean had a comment in the back.
So I know this was discussed, I think 2 years ago at a budget hearing that the tax dollars that the veterans receive, it cannot be used to go towards it. I also reached out to the auditors just to double check to see if there was some way to work around for it to be paid out of the veterans fund. It would need to come out of general fund. It's $250. I think it's a nominal amount for the veterans.
Thank you, Sean.
Okay,
Okay,
we're ready for a motion.
okay. Madam Chair, in consideration of a request to approve insurance coverage for the Tillamook County Veterans Memorial, I move approval.
Second.
And a second, any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Passes. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you.
Cheryl, it sounds like Doug has something else for you.
Well, this,
Are you hot, Pete?
I won't get into this in considerable detail because it's still under discussion, but at the Fair Board meeting last night, there was an issue that came up with respect to insurance on the demolition derby, and I think you have been working with that, and evidently as it was explained to the board, an underwriter had seen a film of what happened and said that the company that currently underwrites it could no longer do that unless the people were moved a rather substantial distance away beyond where they are now, like a 50-foot radius. So my question is, have you been involved in that? And I think you have. And is that straightforward, or is this an exception, or what's going on? Because that's a pretty significant part of the fair, and it got the attention of the Fair Board big time, and they're really concerned about what that will do to the logistics and moving people out. And so could you speak to that and what you know so far?
So what I know so far is that it was my understanding that it's the tires that need to be moved back closer to the, or in farther closer in the infield.
Tires and people,
Well,
maybe, I don't know.
yeah, when when the underwriter talked about that and I sent Cammy what he had said, it's just those tires that need to be moved. He wants the arena for the cars to be smaller, the tires to be moved in so that they are, basically the people are farther away from where the cars can be. And his statement in that email to me, now see, this isn't something new, a couple of things. First of all, these are not easy events to insure. There's one company that I know of that insures these in the United States in a reason, for a reasonable amount. That's who the county has this through. And they insure everybody. So getting those quotes, it's always last second, right before the fair. I finally get it because they have every event in the nation that happens in the summertime. But this was a requirement last year and the fair was able to kind of, it all came down at the last second and we got them to bind without doing it. And this year he's adamant. He's gone online, looked at YouTube, watched the event and said that without moving those tires in the 50 feet and and he even stated that the arena is too big for that particular type of event. I don't know these events. I don't know anything of it, other than the insurance part of it. And that's what his thought process, or his expert opinion, I should say, because that's what he does all the time, is that the arena is too big anyway for the speeds that those cars are supposed to be allowed to reach. So he doesn't seem to think it should be an issue to move those tires in. He's not talking about moving your bleachers or anything. It just would create a bigger distance between the people. So I can get more information from him.
Well,
if
I
the fair
think if
board-
you continue working with Cammy at the fair and they're hoping, of course, to get this resolved sooner than later because, you know, they advertise it and the people expect it. It's been going on now for I don't know how many years, but a long time. And things have changed, as you pointed out earlier, liability constraints are moving around and I can appreciate the reluctance of somebody and then part of the problem is if there's just a single underwriter, then you got a problem because there's no competition
Yeah.
and they have the last word. And so all of a sudden this popped up as a pretty significant issue for the fair board. And so I'm counting on your considerable expertise to solve this for us, I hope.
Well, I'm definitely working with Cammy on it. And so maybe I need to reach back out to her and make sure that we're on the same page as far as what needs to be done, because it sounds like there might be some confusion on the.
Well,
side of it.
and there could be, and I don't, you know, for my part of just being the liaison, and the fair board's pretty independent, as you know, but since it's county property and, you know, I will have my nose in that right up till the day of the event, as we did with fireworks, as you know, that got pushed off for a number of reasons. And I don't want to see this happen there, but all of a sudden, you know, a third party has said, you're going to do this or we're not going to underwrite it, which means there'll be no event. When people see that on TV, I don't want that to be understood that the demolition derby is not going to happen. It very much is planned to happen as in the past, but with some modifications. And so if we can all be pointed in the same direction, I think we can fix it, I hope. So thank you for your input. One of those things.
That is interesting. So yeah, it sounds like it's resolvable and we'll have to work with the drivers to know their space is smaller. Yeah,
I
okay.
think it's definitely resolvable. And this isn't just a, fly by night person underwriter. This is who's been insuring it for years and they do this all over the nation. So they know what the requirements can or should be. And he doesn't seem to think it's a huge issue. I think that maybe there's a perception on the part of the people who get to drive in it that it's going to be too small, but that's not my understanding. So I'll work with Cammy on it.
Thank you. Perfect. Okay, terrific. Are we done with Cheryl?
Yes, we're done with Cheryl.
Thank you, Cheryl.
Now.
Hot seat. Thank you very much, Cheryl.
Thank you.
We appreciate working with you.
Thank you.
Okay. We are on to item 7, which is consideration of a memorandum of agreement with Tillamook County 911 and Manzanita Police Department for Net Motion Software. With us, we have Matt Kelly, Tillamook County Undersheriff. Good morning.
Good morning, Commissioners. Before you today for your consideration is a renewal of our memorandum of agreement with Manzanita Police Department, the County Sheriff's Office, and Tillamook County 911. Essentially what this is the infrastructure to run our computers in the vehicles. When years ago, we used to have what was called a data radio. So instead of self-service, so the communication from 911, all the CAD data or running plates or getting call information off of, from 911 would come through a radio signal, which worked well. But as you can imagine, as technology gets better and better, all that data is basically trying to put it through a pinhole versus a garden hose. So finally, we were able to upgrade to cellular, which is what this is, NetMotion. And when we did that, Manzanita was struggling to get on board with that, and the county had to do it as a whole. So we established this agreement to where they paid for the licensing and the cost that the county accrued for their 4 licenses to be up to speed, so we could do that. And that's all this is to renew that agreement. It's a 400 and some odd change fees that they pay us yearly to pay for those licensing and the contracts for NetMotion till we can do that. And that's about it. And they take on the responsibility of the actual hardware, make sure that the system is secure on their end. And 911 just agrees to allow us, the county, to come into their servers and their data. They don't accrue any costs or anything like that. None of that. Questions?
Okay, no question for me, thank you.
No, none for me. That makes total sense. It's another great partnership piece where the county has, essentially served as seems like the umbrella that makes it possible for Manzanita to be on the same system, and that makes sense.
I agree. I'm fully supportive. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, Madam
you very much.
Chair, in consideration of a memorandum of agreement with Tillamook County 911 and Manzanita Police Department for NetMotion software, I move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Motion passes. Thank you.
Measures.
Item 8 is consideration of a prevailing wage rate contract for construction with Point Monitor Corporation for the Justice Facility Fire Alarm Replacement Project. Good morning. We have Lieutenant Fernando Silvera from the Tillamook County Sheriff's Office. Good morning.
Good morning, Commissioners. I want to start off by apologizing for not being there in person. The reason we're here today is this contract with Point Monitor is to replace the Sheriff's Office fire alarm system. The current smoke detectors are expired. We can no longer replace those. The company told me, yeah, you can find them on Amazon, but I highly recommend not to do that. So of course we won't do that. The main central processing unit is failing. We continue to get false alarm codes, and especially in the AIC unit cells. So it's becoming very concerning. We've had multiple companies out here testing the system, and it's concluded that it's failing. It's past its due date of expiration and being old. As you all know, some of the struggles we're dealing with here in our sheriff's office, especially the jail. So this is what this contract is for, is to replace the whole system throughout the whole sheriff's office.
All right, thank you. Any questions?
Well, my question is, how is that being funded? Was this a budget item, or where does the money come from?
No, we tried to get it done this past budget, but due to some slow process of getting quotes from 3 different companies, it's just going to have to go into the budget.
How much is it roughly?
We're looking at $98,000.
Okay, thank you. It seems to me it's absolutely a necessity, but that's a pretty good chunk of money. So I guess the sheriff's budget will be accountable for that amount of money.
Yeah, I feel like this came up on the McKinstry report, the fire alarm system, as one of those key things. And we've had some conversation about it. And obviously a fire alarm system is not something you have an option on. It has to be functional. Is this a wet system, Lieutenant, or dry
It's
system?
both. It's both
Both.
wet and dry.
Yeah. So, and they're complicated. I'll just say that. We had them at the assisted livings that I operated, and they're complicated and they're expensive, and they absolutely have to fit within the to his point, the detectors that are no longer available in a system that is not certifiable is not acceptable. So, I mean, I agree that this is an absolute must and that we need to take care of it. We know that because the jail was built, remind me, the late 80s?
1996 was open.
96, okay, built in the 90s, so it's obviously in that 30-year range. We're probably going to see a number of things, and I think that was reflected in the McKinstry report as well, as we have the generator out there, we have the fire system out there, we have windows, we have a number of things that are reflected of the fact that it is roughly a 30-year-old building that we're going to need to figure out how we manage that as an asset. So I don't think it's an option to say no. Sean's waving her finger.
Was this part of the building improvement, Rachel? Discussion?
I recall it being in the building improvement fund this fiscal year, and then was there a small amount of money that was spent to upgrade something, but I was told that it wasn't happening, and so the funds weren't allocated there anymore.
But they weren't spent this year, which I think it was like 250 that were allocated this year, so they'd roll forward for next year if need be, or no?
No, because I was told it wasn't happening several months ago. And
Is,
then it resurfaced again.
Was that for the, when we did the inspection and the inspector found that the pipe lining was corroded and it was going to be a high cost, but I ended up actually requesting a full inspection of all the fire alarm water pipes. And we came to find out it was just one secluded area that we were able to get it fixed. And the pipes itself were in good condition, except one isolated area that we ended up, I believe, was instead of $200,000, we ended up only spending $5,000 to repair it.
Yes, that's my recollection. And so under that,
Okay, so this is
it was
not,
done.
this hasn't been budgeted anywhere.
No.
First I've heard of it then.
So will this then, in terms of our budget, and at least at this point, what we've allocated for facilities pieces, this would potentially come out of that facilities piece or come out of the sheriff's budget? I know it's just logistical, but I think it's whether or not we have to, I mean, we have not yet approved the budget. So whether or not there's any budget change that has to happen, it's obviously not at the 10% level of anything that requires, I don't think, a budget change. But since we are in the process of approving a budget, does it make sense to make sure this is in?
Yeah, so it's not in Fund 301. It was, the 250 was reduced to whatever that cost was, Fernando, the 5,000, when that repair was done. And then it was my understanding in talking with him, it was done. There was nothing else coming out of there. So the funds went into other 301 projects, and then nothing is slated in the next fiscal year's budget. And so 301, as you may recall, I presented at the budget committee, is for courthouse projects. Not that that can't change, but that's what's slated. There's nothing for other facilities in there. And there's only $1 million. And my request was
1.4.
several million.
Okay. Well, clearly this has to be done and we'll have to figure out how to pay for it. So, that's work ahead, but I don't think we have the option of not doing it. And I am consistently dismayed by how much things cost, and including this, but that just seems to be the way of the world now, that costs are rising exponentially for everyone, including government. So I'm fully supportive of this project, and I think we need to move forward with it.
I agree.
Madam Chair, in consideration of a prevailing wage rate contract for construction with Point Monitor Corporation for the Justice Facility Fire Alarm Replacement Project, I move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Motion passes. Thank you, Fernando.
Thank you, Commissioner. Appreciate it.
Item 11 is consideration of a professional services agreement with Dowell for the Wilson River Training Structure Shiloh Levee Project. Oh, sorry. Yes. Sorry. Let's go back to number 10. Consideration of an out-of-state travel request for Anya Reeser to attend the Northwest Primary Care Leadership Institute training in Seattle, Washington, September 17th through 21st.
Marlene was unable to be with us this morning, so she asked if I would carry this.
Terrific.
So I think it's a fairly straightforward request. Anya is moving into a leadership position at the health department, and I think this is an important training for her to have.
Okay.
And I have no questions. As I've said on several occasions, I support travel and training. That's an investment in human beings that make the county more efficient and certainly more effective. So, yes.
Okay, I agree.
Okay. Madam Chair, in consideration of an out-of-state travel request for Anya Reeser to attend the Northwest Primary Care Leadership Institute training in Seattle, Washington on 9/17/24 to 9/21/24, I move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Motion passes. Thank you. All right, now we're at item 11, consideration of a professional services agreement with Dowell for the Wilson River Training Structure Shiloh Levee Project. With us, we have Chris Lady, Director of Public Works. Good morning. You're muted.
And I'm not muted, you would think,
There
after
we go.
you should be able to figure this out.
That's okay.
So we previously had presented information on a notice of intent to award this contract for Dow. We went out and sought proposals. We received a couple of proposals. Dow was selected. We went through contract negotiations. This is the result of the contract negotiations. When the estimate for grants were put together in internal budgeting, it was anticipated in 2022 that the budget would be at $498,000 for design only. And this proposal is a design packet of $496,000. So for the design side, we're under. The construction engineering side was anticipated to be $345,000. What is proposed is $174,000. So quite a bit of savings from what we anticipated to what the negotiated price is. Total engineering cost, this is design and construction, is at $670,372. Request approval for this award or contract.
Thank you, Chris. Doug?
No, I have no questions on that either. It's part of something I think's been under consideration for quite some time and time to get it done. And it sounds like we've got some favorable numbers as compared with other things that seem to go the other direction.
True. Commissioner?
Yeah, so Chris, this is for, you said design and then you said construction, but I was thinking this project overall
Construction
was,
engineering.
thank you. That's what I was like. I thought construction was like 4 million. So, okay. I
Right.
just wanted to make sure I wasn't losing my mind or hadn't missed some really wonderful step in which it wasn't going to be that much.
I wish that was the case. This is design engineering and construction engineering.
Thank you. Yeah, no, this is great. I, along with everyone else, I'm delighted that this is moving forward and let's get this step of it done.
I agree. I'm thrilled and I'm also very much pleased that it came in considerably lower. The price came in considerably lower for this than was anticipated. Again, I repeat something I just said a minute ago, that I'm dismayed by what things cost, but this is what things cost. So yeah, so I think we need to move forward.
Okay. Madam Chair, in consideration of a professional services agreement with Dowell for the Wilson River Training Structure Shiloh Levee project, I move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Motion passes. Thank you, Chris. Okay, we've taken item 12 already, so moving on to 13, consideration of acknowledgement and approval of a Tillamook Lightwave grant and letter of support for the Oregon Broadband Technical Assistance Program. Commissioner Olson.
Thank you. Not too long ago, Tillamook Lightwave, which is an ORS 190 organization between Tillamook County and Tillamook PUD, has applied for and received a grant of $147,000. And that's a planning grant to put together a more elaborate and comprehensive proposal for some of the larger sums of money that are available from the federal government through the state of Oregon. Specifically, there's about $680 million to be handed out for various fiber improvement projects for improved internet service around Oregon, primarily in rural areas, which puts Tillamook County towards the front. This series of grants for which we applied, Lightwave applied, was for the planning side of it, and there were 27 applicants and 9 awards. And we were one of the awards given, and so we have $147,000. But before they print the check, they need a letter from the chair of whatever organization is successful saying, yes, as all is in order and we support it fully and we're behind it. And that is the purpose of asking our chair to sign a letter to the Oregon Broadband Department, which is part of Business Oregon.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Agreed. I'm happy to sign the letter and I think we're all excited to get the money.
Absolutely. Okay. Hey, Madam Chair, in consideration of an acknowledgement and approval of a Tillamook Lightwave grant and letter of support for the Oregon Broadband Technical Assistance Program, I move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Pass it. Thank you. Item 14 is consideration, excuse me, of approval for the 2023 to 2025 grant solicitation for the Oregon Behavioral Health Deflection Program. Commissioner Scar.
Thank you. And I'd like to invite Bridget Hess to join us. Bridget is with Adventist Health and
morning,
is
Bridget.
our Tillamook coordinator and working with us on our COSIC grant. So I'm going to lay out just a little background. I'm going to ask Bridget to talk to us a little bit about how this all fits together. So I do think we are all familiar somewhat with the deflection grant program. It comes out of House Bill 4002. It is one of the components that bill that they put into that bill to address Measure 110 fixes and what will come following the Measure 110 fixes, which does recriminalize small amounts of hard drugs. And what is expected is, of course, that law enforcement will again be engaging with individuals who have small amounts of hard drugs. And the intention is that there be a program available that would allow people to move from that law enforcement interaction directly into a treatment opportunity without having the establishment of a criminal background for them. So it was a way that in negotiating this change to the law, that those who had passed Measure 110 in the beginning and those who supported it were able to say the intention of that was to not have people's lives ruined by a criminal or felony charge for drugs, when in fact it was a small amount and it was really an underlying issue of drug use and abuse, as opposed to a criminal, activity of selling drugs, et cetera. So the sort of compromise was House Bill 4002's piece of creating a deflection program. So in Tillamook County right now, we do not have a deflection program. Some counties around the state do. And when they did this bill, they created a formula by which all 36 counties in the state of Oregon have the opportunity to receive funding specifically for deflection. Because we do not yet have a deflection program and don't entirely understand what will look like, we are going for a planning grant. So the documents you have in front of you are actually a blank grant application. We're working with Adventist Health, with Bridget and Melody, to complete that grant application, and just acknowledgement that it's $150,000 that's waiting at the state for us for the completion of this grant application. So Bridget, I was hoping you could talk to us a little bit about deflection as you're learning about it with the COSIP grant, which is also a county grant, and then how you see this kind of fitting together and why, although we have no program and, would be creating something entirely new, it makes sense in Tillamook County and makes sense for Adventist Health to be our partner with that.
Yeah, of course. So deflection programming, it takes place before arrest, like Aaron mentioned. And what the Oregon Behavioral Health Deflection Program will help us do is essentially give us the resources to plan and select which deflection pathways will work best for Tillamook County. There have been 6 different deflection pathways that have, been identified by the DOJ as being effective in most communities. They're kind of like the best practice, and what this grant will allow us to do is essentially dig deeper into those different pathways and identify which ones will work best for us in our county. How it ties into the Comprehensive Opioid Stimulant and Substance Use Program, also known as COSUP. So the Behavioral Health Deflection Program, it's really just a planning grant. The COSUP grant will help us actually implement these strategies and programs. There's different support through that grant for things like crisis intervention training and being able to train law enforcement and first responders on how to interact with the identified deflection pathway that we decide to go with. And so, I'm sorry, I forgot the latter end of the question, Erin.
That's okay. It was just,
Okay.
how do these fit? How
Yeah.
do these fit together? And why is Adventist Health the right place for this? Because we are, in the grant, we are asking for contracted services and intending to subcontract with Adventist Health, so that really this work of the deflection creation is partnered with the COSIP part of this, rather than running two somewhat parallel paths.
Yeah, of course. I mean, the Artilma Consortium is a great reason why to lean into with the partnership with Adventist Health and just all the partnerships that we've built through that consortium so far. There's also resources within the hospital that would be a great use for the deflection pathways, being able to look at things like overdose mapping, like where the most overdoses are happening in our community, and being able to do active outreach in those areas and things like that. So yeah, both of these grants are very complementary to one another, and they just work hand in hand. And so the work that we're already starting to do with COSUP and building out and supporting some of those community partners, and the work that's already being done and being able to build on that once we have identified the deflection pathways that we would like to move forward with. I think it's just a great reason to continue that partnership.
Thank you. Yeah, and I agree. And we have talked about this at the local Public Safety Coordinating Council. The required partners for the deflection grant are the sheriff's office, the DA's office, Tillamook Family Counseling, and everyone has nodded and said, yes, we want to go forward on this. And so everybody kind of said yes, and we don't have the capacity to be the leader. So I think that's the other place where Adventist Health is really helpful in this. So,
Thank you.
yes.
Well, thank you. I appreciate what Adventist Health, having sat on their board for a number of years, what they do as a leader and I guess a premier health provider in Tillamook County. And they seem to step up every time there's an ask or calling of some sort, they're there. And so this certainly makes sense. And if it can divert a few people going a different direction, nothing wrong with that. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm also grateful that Adventist Health is willing to step forward in this role to address the deflection issues. And thank you for being here today and welcome. Is this your first time in our meeting?
It is, yeah.
Well, we're very glad you're here. Glad to have you in the role and in the community. And I've seen you in lots of meetings already. I know you're working really hard to do good work in the community. I think it's interesting, the deflection program, to back up from a higher, more remote point of view. What's interesting is that Oregon voters approved Measure 110 with great intentions, like Commissioner Scar said, and there were unintended negative consequences. And so Oregon voters again have spoken up and said, hey, we want to change this. This isn't working the way we wanted it to. And so the fix is going to cause considerable work. The fix to go back and create something new that's what we're in right now, is how do we do it? How do we fund it? Who's going to do it? What does it look like going forward? What does it look like going forward for law enforcement, for the DA's office, for the jail, for the juvenile department? So now we're in all of that work, like what we were doing wasn't working, and what are we going to do instead? So I appreciate your work on this and also yours, and I'm fully supportive.
Great, thank you. Okay, Madam Chair, in consideration of approval of the 2023-2025 grant solicitation for the Oregon Behavioral Health Deflection Program, I move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Motion
Thank you,
passes.
Bridget. so
Thank you,
much.
Bridget.
Appreciate you.
Thanks for being here. Item 15 is consideration of a professional services agreement with Praxis Political for the Public Safety Radio Communications System Bond Campaign Project. Rachel Haggerty, Chief of Staff.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
Last week, you approved a notice of intent to award to hire Praxis Political to engage with the county to implement our extensive outreach and communication campaign as we move forward to November to put before the voters a general obligation bond to upgrade our public safety radio communication system. So today before you is the contract, and we are still in the protest period, but due to the sensitive nature of our timeline, we're putting it before you today, and then barring, if we receive no protests by the end of the day, you'll sign the agreement tomorrow. So before you is the contract.
Terrific, thank you. Doug, would you like to speak?
Yes, I will. Thank you, Commissioner. I have personally no issues with this at all. There were, I think, RFP was published, excuse me, in due course, and I think there were 7 firms that had interest and only 2 submitted, as I recall. And we interviewed both of them, several of us, and they had the better package, I think, and a little more experience, and that's why you go through the process. And so what they will do is they will help us fashion a statement that goes into the public through a variety of media, from social media and newspapers, or perhaps radio, and a variety of other ways to communicate, and simply say what the county is doing and why it's being done and what the cost would be and what the benefits are. And it will be essentially factual, because counties can neither promote nor oppose a measure that they create. So this will be a method to inform the voters or anyone who cares to listen, for that matter. And since public safety is such a critical part of everybody's life, sometimes more often than they would like, the system needs to be upgraded. And I think we've talked about it in the past, but the radio system that is currently used by police, fire, medical, and a variety of others is 20+ years old. Excuse me. And in that length of time, there have been quite a number of technical changes. And so it's time to upgrade. The system is failing in some respects. And so in order to get a new one, we have to ask the voters to support a bond measure. And there'll be lots more to come on that. But this is one step that will bring in a professional communications firm and assemble a way to tell the voters what is happening, what is going on. And again, not advocating. There is a separate effort that can advocate, and I'll be part of that as well because of the position I hold. We're allowed to do that. County staff essentially is allowed only to put out factual matter, and that's exactly what this contract will do. So it's, I think, around $59,000 in that range. And so I certainly support it. They're a qualified firm. They've worked on all kinds of campaigns in the Northwest over recent years, and with considerable success. And so we're hoping they'll do the same here.
Thank you. Commissioner?
I think we've discussed the radio piece at length. I think it's definitely exciting. We're moving forward. Praxis, actually, I first came in contact with them. They were the spokespeople for the Kroger Safeway merger that we're reaching out and doing community education and engagement. They're no longer on that contract, as I understand it. But yeah, so they've done some work in our community, and I think are probably well positioned to do this work.
Terrific. I agree. I think that it's imperative that we communicate extensively with people about this issue and about the bond. And this is the path we're moving forward in order to do that communication and engagement with the community. And it's a big job. And what we know about communication is that always, no matter what, there are people who will say, I didn't know anything about that. So we're trying to prevent that. I realize it's not possible to prevent that entirely, but we're going to do our level best to make sure everyone understands the issue and why we're asking for the bond. So I think,
Could I add one
yeah,
more thing?
please.
I'll ask Rachel to speak to the funding side of it, the source of the funding, because this is not purely general fund local money. There's another source that's involved, and I think people need to know that we're not taking money out of some of our primary services to do this.
Correct. This is being funded by ARPA funds.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we're ready for a motion.
Madam Chair, in consideration of a professional services agreement with Praxis Political for the Public Safety Radio Communication Systems Bond Campaign Project, I move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Motion passes. Thank you. Item 16 is consideration of a grant application for an active transportation infrastructure investment program for the Jensen Property Realignment Planning and Design Project. Rachel.
Kiwanis Corridor Project Preferred Concept was adopted by the board in 2022. We are nearing completion of implementing the first strategy, which is the reconstruction of the Cape Kiwanis parking lot. It's going great. The south half is open and we're still on point to open up the full parking lot and the restroom next month. The next strategy in the preferred concept that the board and the Pacific City Woods Parking Advisory Committee has elected to proceed with is the Jensen property, more specifically the realignment of Pacific Avenue, Sunset Drive, and Cape Kiwanda at the intersection by the Beachy Bridge component of the Jensen project or the Jensen property development. So before you today is a request that our grant services team prepared a robust application to submit to this program for the amount of $672,000 for engineering, design, and permitting. There is a match requirement. I'm sorry, that's the full cost. The request amount to the program is $541,600. That's 80% of the engineering, design, and permitting cost. The county's match requirement is 20%, and that is being allocated by two sources, $100,000 from Public Works Department because we have bike ped funds available for the multi-use path segment that will go through the intersection, and $35,400 from the parking fees.
Fabulous.
So it's ready for consideration and it is due on the 17th.
Wonderful. Thank you. Commissioners?
Well, thank you. I'm fairly familiar with what this has been going on, not only because I live in that part of the world, but I've also sat on that committee here recently that's looking at the overall project. That intersection, if you haven't been there, is one that was designed by people who perhaps weren't at the top of their class in engineering school. I'll just say that, something like that. It's very difficult. There's a free right turn. There's a number of signs. And every time I go through that, which is at least twice a day, sometimes much more often, people come to a halt when they shouldn't. People make a turn without stopping when they should. People go straight through. And I think if we were to look back, there's been a number of accidents there over the years, maybe not fatal because the speeds are rather low. It's more like a 15, 20, 25 mile an hour, but it's very confusing. And so the fact that this is going to get done, I think is a serious step forward for the thousands of people who travel that route. I do remember some years ago, there was another design that was actually a roundabout. And for whatever reason, it got set aside, which in my opinion was a good decision. But this seems to be much better. There's a realignment and it fits into the overall scheme. So I think this is a very positive step forward for all the people who live there and who visit there.
What have you got against roundabouts?
I think roundabouts are a creation of a demented mind. That's a personal opinion. Now, don't take that. I just don't like them. The first one I ever drove in was Boston, and they have them all over there and all over the country. But and I understand it's for traffic calming. That's the word they use. And it just to me is, you know, what was wrong with a four-way stop or with traffic lights? Why do you have to go around in a circle and try to change lanes and get pushed into somewhere you don't want to go? So don't get me started. Thank you for asking.
Thank you. I think my first roundabout was in Europe and I got on it and I was on it for a long time because not only we were in Scotland, so we're on the wrong side of the road. Everything was backwards and we got on this roundabout and it was just like, okay, we're just going to keep going until we actually figure out how this thing works because I'd never seen one before either, right? Coming from, you know, Maupin of all of my traffic knowledge. So yes, no, I think this is great. I am excited about moving forward with the traffic realignment. I think that this is an amazing project that will obviously take many years to complete. The whole Jensen property and the pathway and all of those things, but I'm happy that we're able to continue to take bites out of it as grant funding becomes available. So thank you to our grants team and Rachel for, getting us prepared to put this application out.
Likewise, I think it's a great project also, and I'm pleased that that grant funding is available, that you're seeking it. Thank you. We've talked for some time about the ideal of using TLT funding and the parking revenue funding as leverage for grants, because the TLT funding alone and the parking revenue funding alone definitely won't pay for the Pacific City Cape Coanda master plan. But to use that as leverage for grants and as matching funds, et cetera, is ideal. It's perfect. So thank you for your work on this.
Madam Chair, in consideration of a grant application for an active transportation infrastructure investment program for the Jensen Property Realignment Planning and Design Project, I move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussions? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Motion passes. All right. Do we have any board concerns at this time?
I do not at this time. Thank you.
No, we've got things to discuss this afternoon, but not right now. Thank you.
Okay. We have a executive session this morning.
I'm going to put it under 192.660.2E.
Thank you. So before we do that, I'll read the board meeting and the board announcements. The commissioners will hold a board briefing on today, Wednesday, June 12th at 2 p.m. to discuss weekly commissioner updates. The meeting will be held in this room. The teleconference number is 971-254-3149, conference ID 866-914-607#. The commissioners will hold a leadership team meeting to discuss the strategic plan on Friday, June 14th, 2024 at 10 a.m. The meeting will be held again in this room. The teleconference number is 971-254-3149, conference ID 866-914-607#. The local public safety coordinating council meeting will be held on Monday, June 17th, 2024 at noon. The meeting will be held again in this room. The teleconference number is 971-254-3149, conference ID 155-859-952#. And Juneteenth is an observed holiday for the county and the Oregon State Circuit Court. All county offices in the Tillamook County Courthouse and the Tillamook County Library, administrative offices in the Jail and Justice Facility, the Public Works Department, Department of Community Development, the Surveyor's Office, and Health and Human Services Department and clinics, and the State Circuit Court will be closed on Wednesday, June 19th, 2024. Okay, and if people want more information about those announcements and meetings, all of that information is available on our website on the Commissioner's landing page. So with that, we will recess this meeting and go into executive session.